As a Nigerian hairstylist, owning a salon in the US is one of my dreams. And anytime I talk about this with friends or people I meet, they always ask this particular question. Aren't you afraid of leaving your family and living in another country? I always tell them no, there is nothing to be afraid of. But this story I'm about to share is creeping me out so bad that I don't know what to think about the whole idea of relocating to the US. Today's story is about Lindsay Hawker, the girl from England who traveled to Japan to teach English but never returned. This terrifying event began when Tatsuya Ichihashi followed Lindsay from the train station to her house. Tatsuya Ichihashi is a 28-year-old who graduated from the University of Chiba with a degree in horticulture. His father was a medical doctor while his mom was a dentist. He was known to be a loner and also lazy. Instead of using his degree to earn a living, he chose to live off the 900 yuan monthly allowance he got from his parents. I would say his parents contributed immensely to his slobbiness, because putting a grown man on a monthly allowance is a strong way of saying we support your decision to be a liability, and we are ready to clean up every mess you make. I remember putting in effort and even starting a small food business as a teenager just because I didn't want to become a thief. That was the impression my parents gave my siblings and I, that every lazy individual always ends up as a thief. Even though Tatsuya was a slob that had no stream of income, his parents were extravagant enough to get him a 3-bedroom apartment. And in order to get by sometimes, probably when his allowance don't pop in on time, or maybe he squandered everything before the month runs out, he resorts to stealing. It got to a point where he coupled this with assault. He assaulted a woman he tried to steal from. The case was resolved outside of court when his father paid the woman he assaulted $10,000 not to press charges. According to Tatsuya's ex and those who knew him, they said he was obsessed with his body and spent most of his time in the gym trying to remain fit. He also liked to read violent manga. I think it's his way of feeding his monsters. Enough of Tatsuya's personal life, back to the story. In the month of March 2007, Tatsuya approached Lindsay Hawker. Lindsay was said to be very smart. She graduated with a first-class degree from Leeds University, where she studied biology. Those who knew her said she was successful, determined, and had everything under control. Lindsay must have had enough of England, so she decided to take a break, go to Japan to explore and have more experience in life. In 2006, she started teaching English under the Nova Company, a big English school service that connects tutors with students. That day, Lindsay had alighted from a train at the station where she usually leaves her bicycle before boarding a train to work when Tatsuya approached her. Tatsuya approached Lindsay and said, "Hey, I know you. You are my English teacher." Lindsay said she didn't know him, but he insisted he knew her. She vehemently said she didn't know him and began to cycle home. Tatsuya, who spent most of his time on a treadmill in the gym, didn't find it exhausting to tag along. He strode beside her at first, then increased his pace to match Lindsay's speed, jogging all the way to her house, which was quite a distance. When they got to Lindsay's apartment, an exhausted Tatsuya requested for a glass of water. Out of pity, or should we say out of kindness, Lindsay invited him in for a glass of water. Lindsay had 2 roommates who worked in the same place as her, so she didn't see any reason to be afraid of letting a total stranger in. After drinking water, Tatsuya began drawing Lindsay, and this is his drawing of her. Tatsuya left his phone number and email address by the side of the drawing. He pleaded with Lindsay to be his English teacher. offering to pay her $30 per hour. Seeing that the offer was good, Lindsay agreed to tutor him. 4 days later, they met at a coffee shop for an English lesson. From the CCTV footage gotten from the coffee shop, you could tell that Lindsay wasn't comfortable. You could see her fiddle with her hair nervously and moving backwards whenever Tatsuya tries to move closer. After the lesson, Tatsuya claimed he had forgotten his fee at home. He suggested they go to his place so Lindsay could get her money and head home from there. Lindsay and Tatsuya took a cab to his place, with Lindsay requesting that the driver wait for her to get the money. They went into Tatsuya's apartment, and after waiting for some moments, the cab driver eventually left when Lindsay didn't show up. And that was the last time Lindsay was seen alive. The next day, the Nova company noticed that Lindsay wasn't in school, which was unlike her, as she was hardworking and faithful to her job. It became alarming when her roommate confirmed she hasn't returned to her apartment either, so they alerted the police. Lindsay and her family have a strong bond. They literally talk every day, so it was normal for them to realize on time that something was wrong, but not to the extent of their daughter being out of existence. After missing work for another day, Nova Company contacted her family before reaching out to the police to start an investigation. The investigation started immediately. Lindsay's roommates were questioned and they told the police that Lindsay had been at the coffee shop before her disappearance and that the person she was meeting had given her a sketch with his email address. With that, the police were able to get their first suspect. The police went to Tatsuya's apartment, but he wasn't there. They peeked through the window and saw that the lights in the living room were off. But somehow, they were able to spot his silhouette lurking in the dark. Apart from trying to hide from them, the police suspicions heightened when they saw that Tatsuya had removed his bathtub, brought it to the balcony. They immediately called for backup, and more officers arrived. They were at the verge of breaking into his apartment when he bolted out of the room barefooted, carrying just a sack on his back. The police tried to catch him, but he was too fast. He escaped them and ran out of sight, all thanks to his obsession with the gym once again. Since they couldn't nab the suspect, they rummaged his apartment. The police went to the balcony to investigate the bathtub. The bathtub was filled with sand, but on a closer look, they noticed a human hand sticking out. They emptied it, and there was Lindsay's naked corpse. The marks on Lindsay's body revealed she had been severely beaten before strangled to death. Also, her hair was shaved. Some claimed Tatsuya killed Lindsay so he could shave her hair and use it as a wig. It was also unraveled that Tatsuya added a decomposing agent to the soil to enable Lindsay's body decompose faster, and then planted a flower on her shallow grave to distract whoever saw the bathtub filled with sand. The next day, Tatsuya became the most wanted man on the face of Earth as the police announced a nationwide manhunt of him. With the way Tatsuya's face was all over the world as he was always on TV and newspapers, one would conclude that nabbing him would be as easy as telling a cow from a mouse. But Tatsuya was never found. Days drifted to weeks, and weeks to months, but he was not found. Several months after the death of their daughter, Lindsay's parents arrived to Japan. Killing your child in one of the most gruesome ways is unforgivable, and roaming the streets as if nothing happened was another thing that can never be forgiven nor ignored.
I appeal to you all to look at this picture. This was my daughter. Remember her face. Remember this face.
How would any father feel if his daughter was murdered? No one knows how we feel unless you have lost children yourself.
And that is why hasn't he been caught? And what do they think, or where do they think they can look, or what can they do to try and bring this man out, to draw this rat out of his hole?
While
Because he
Lindsay's
must be
parents
hiding
were busy
somewhere.
protesting and criticizing the Japanese police for their incompetence, Tatsuya was on a traveling spree. He traveled from one part of Japan to the other until he finally settled in a remote village called Okinawa in Oha Island, where just 4 families lived. Living in Okinawa wasn't easy, as he sometimes fed on snakes to survive, so he left there for Osaka in 2008. In Osaka, he took a construction job, and there he was homeless too and struggled to survive as well, because he was saving his earnings to enable him have a plastic surgery and alter his looks just to avoid the police. While saving up for a professional surgery, Tatsuya performed some local ones by himself, like cutting out the moles on the side of his face, part of his lower lips to look thinner, and changing his nose with the aid of a needle and thread. In 2009, probably after being pressured by Lindsay's parents and the public, the police decided it was time they stepped up. They did that by raising the reward for any intel regarding Tatsuya from 1 million to 10 million yen. The police also suspected that Tatsuya must have altered his looks to be able to hide for this long, so they released images highlighting the unique moles on his face to help identify him if he had truly altered his looks. But being the cunning person he was, he had already removed these moles on his own, again outsmarting the police. But on the 24th of October the same year, 2009, a miracle happened. A plastic surgeon in Nagoya informed the police that he had just performed a nose correction surgery on Tatsuya. Tatsuya had no choice but to take the usual before and after surgery pictures. Those of you who have watched the movie 20 Pounds of Beauty should know this. Little did Tatsuya knew that this escape plan was going to be his downfall. The police shared this before and after photos with the media houses all over Japan. The photos went viral, and his colleagues at the construction company recognized him immediately. After being busted, Tatsuya was on the run again. He planned to leave Osaka by boarding a ferry to his refuge, the remote village where he ate snakes for sustenance. On the 10th of November, Tatsuya made his way to the ferry to start his 3-day journey to Okinawa. There again, he was able to escape the police, but he seemed to forget something. He has forgotten that he was the most wanted man in Japan, and his face was all over the country. Unfortunately for him, he was apprehended that day. Before he was apprehended, Tatsuya was about to board the ferry when one of the workers recognized him and alerted the security. Tatsuya was confronted if he was Tatsuya Ichihashi, and at that moment it dawned on him that he had met his Waterloo. There was no escaping this time around. He admitted he was Tatsuya, the murderer of Lindsay Hawker. Tatsuya was finally arrested after 2 years of being on the run. He was initially charged with abandonment of a dead body, then rape and murder were added to the list. He was held in custody for 18 months before standing for trial on the 4th of July. All the evidence were against him, and the public solicited for a death penalty. In his trial, Tatsuya admitted to all the charges leveled against him, and on the 11th of July, he was sentenced to life in prison, even though Lindsay's parents and the public wanted him to be executed.